All right, and again, a few more definitions for us. Types of risk. So not all risk is created equal. And if you recall, we kind of had an economic meltdown a few years back, and we kept hearing the term too big to fail. And that became a term that was being used in relation to things like the automobile industry. And the idea was, so let's say that the automobile industry fails. Well, that's one thing, but it doesn't just take down the automobile industry, right? So let's just say there's a failure in Detroit and GM goes out of business. Well, that also is going to affect organizations that service vehicles. That's going to affect organizations that sell parts to cars. If that industry were to dry up, then people would leave the location. So hotels, real estate, all those things would be impacted. So the idea is when we talk about systemic risk, what we're looking at is specific markets. There are so many interdependencies and everything's so interconnected that we have a much larger risk than we might initially identify. Okay. Contagious risks. So we can look at contagious risks in a couple of ways. Sometimes when a risk event happens, it may spread very quickly to other vendors. For instance, loss of confidence in a particular industry. So let's say, very recently a single major hotel chain had a breach of information, and they had over 500 million customer accounts potentially compromised. So now all of a sudden I think about, well, wait a minute, that wasn't even the hotel that I used, but how does this other hotel chain store information? Are they any more secure? Well, all of a sudden I don't trust them either. So, if Target gets impacted, doesn't that affect how we think about Target, but also Walmart and Kmart and some of the others? So that's a contagious risk. We also could look at that as a single event that impacts lots of other organizations. And even if they're not business partners, they don't have to be business partners. There was a denial of service attack on Dyn, which is a DNS service provider. So it does name resolution for some huge internet players. By attacking the Dyn DNS servers, Amazon was unreachable, Twitter, Facebook, Google. So that was an effect. That was a negative event that happened that have impacted many different organizations, not a single one. Okay. All right, another type of risk is called a black swan risk. It's an obscure risk. And the reason it's called a black swan risk is everybody knows there are no black swans, except there are. So for a long period of time, it was simply considered fact that swans were white. That was a characteristic of swans. They were white. Until suddenly we found black swans. So many times there are these elements that we think are not possible just because we've never seen them. These are sometimes also called unknown unknowns. And it's been defined that you have known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So a known unknown, yes, I'm really saying this, but a known unknown is something like if I'm having a picnic, weather. So bad weather is going to, I don't know if it's going to rain or not, but I know enough that it's on my radar. If I'm having a picnic, it's technically possible a family of bears come through and steal everybody's picnic basket. That was just for me. But that's not something that's on my radar. That's never happened to me at a picnic. So that's an obscure risk. Doesn't mean it can't. Okay? It just means I haven't seen it before. So obscure risks are difficult. How do you deal with the great unknown? Well, you plan ahead and you have business continuity in place for whatever else happens. So when we have these risks that are unknown, like I said, if they're unknown, you can't really do much. But I can look at assets based on their value and I can acknowledge the fact that there are just unknown things that could happen. So ways that we can deal with obscure risk is for our high value assets, make sure they're visible, and make sure that we have recognition capabilities. What I mean by that is I can't even imagine all the things that could happen to my data. So as far as visibility, I monitor it. I examine it on a regular basis. I make sure that my information is protected in such a way that whatever's going wrong can, if something's out of the normal, that can be detected and can be recognized. So visibility and recognition both go hand in hand. All right, so that's a great place to stop and take a quick break. And we're going to take about 5 minutes. My watch says it is 12:09. We're going to take 6 minutes, by golly. And I'm going to ask you to be back at 12:15. And at 12:15, we are going to pick up and we're going to start talking about risk governance. And then we'll talk about risk management. All right, so let's go ahead and take our break. And we'll be back at 12:15.